Hello, welcome back to the Villa View. It's time for a match preview as Villa take on Manchester City on Sunday afternoon away from home. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by European football expert Kevin Hatchard to chat through the game. We're going to have a little look at Unai Emery as well. As I say, Kev's a European football expert, so we'll have seen a lot of Emery's teams over the years, how they've set up. So we plan to go through that and look at how Villa might set up on Sunday. First off, Kev, how are you?
Yeah, really good. Really good. Some good games this weekend, so looking forward to them.
Yeah, good to link up with you again. I worked with Kev for Sky Sports News over January, the transfer window. We had some good chats. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into it and picking Kev's brain. First off, do you like being called a European football expert as you're about to do something? Because I feel like it puts you under undue pressure, perhaps.
Yeah, nice to be an expert in anything, or at least people think I am. So that's always good. European football journalist is fine, but expert's always
expert.
Nice.
I've just copied what they were calling you on Sky Sports News, to be honest. But yeah, let's get into the game then. Villa, tough trip to Manchester City on Sunday. City off the back of a defeat to Spurs. Villa off the back of a poor defeat at home to Leicester as well. So, as a Villa fan, obviously, I don't hold out much hope because I did a stat show yesterday and Manchester City don't lose too many games in a row, but they are not the same beast that they have been over the last few years, Kev.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the situation they've got at the moment is that they're a little bit stuck between two things. So they've tried to evolve the team. Bringing in Erling Haaland was obviously a massive part of that. And to start with, I was surprised actually with how quickly they got to grips with him being in the team, because in transition, so he could do damage running off the back of centre backs and running in behind, but also they were getting him the ball in the box. I think one of the things that people maybe don't focus on so much with Haaland is the fact that he's an excellent penalty box predator. They think of him as somebody who's big, strong, quick, runs at defenders, makes great runs deep off the back of defenders. They don't maybe focus on how good his movement is. And we saw that with Dortmund at times, and we definitely saw that in the early part of the season with Manchester City. I think there's an element here of City's players reverting to what they know. So when they played with a false nine, didn't have that dedicated centre forwards, they naturally would be a bit more circumspect. They wouldn't play that early ball because they wouldn't want to lose possession. That's one of the big things about Pep Guardiola's game. But what they're missing is the opportunity to play Haaland in, because he's making really intelligent runs. They're not finding him, and he's having to come ever so deep to get involved at times, and that's just not his game. So I think they'll get there in the end. I think they started well with that. And it's kind of fallen off a little bit because results haven't gone so well. And players, humans, naturally revert to what they know when they're a bit more stressed and things aren't going so well.
Yeah, it was weird to see him dropping deep against Spurs because it's not really what you associate his game with at all. But you were saying off camera that, you know, he's trying to get involved in the game. He's doing everything he can to get involved in the game, but that isn't his game at all. I guess as well, City losing Cancelo, who was a massive part of what they did last season. De Bruyne wasn't in the team, bizarrely, on Sunday for that game as well. I guess they're probably two of the Man City players that are capable of getting the ball to him quickly, and they weren't there on Sunday.
Yeah, and the Joao Cancelo thing, I think, is really illustrative of the situation there at the moment, because he's the kind of guy that if he's not in the team, he's going to speak up. We know that throughout his career, that he's been happy to challenge coaches. He's been happy to speak up when he's not happy about things. And the fact that Pep Guardiola was prepared to move a player of that quality on loan as well, kind of shows you that he's trying to stamp his authority on things. We had that extraordinary diatribe in his press conference the other week when he was talking about a kind of lack of hunger and how the players needed to step up. So all is not well there. I think that's understandable. I think to an extent we're maybe finding that at Liverpool with Jurgen Klopp. It's not universally true, but when a coach is at a club for a long, long time, it's hard to make that message resonate quite as clearly as it did when you had the first few years. It's very hard as well to rebuild a team and rebuild a style on the fly while you're trying to be competitive at the top end. Liverpool are finding that hard. Arsenal couldn't do it. They had a couple of seasons where they really struggled. They failed to qualify for Europe. It's only now under Ten Hag that United are really managing to make that work. So it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and Villa are obviously at some point, obviously the summer, Villa are going to be going through a rebuild of their own, but they've got off to a great start under Unai Emery, although shame you've had to come on off the back of a defeat, because Saturday's defeat against Leicester wasn't great. Now, you've watched a lot of Emery teams, you've seen a lot of his teams over the years. Just kind of, it felt like growing pains a little bit on Saturday, just in individual errors, trying to get used to something new.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Leicester game, if you look at some of the mistakes that were made, that's all part of players just processing this information. And I think the temptation as fans, and we all do this, is to see something new, see them building from the back, see them giving the ball away in and around the penalty area. And you think, this is rubbish, get rid of it, it's not going to work. But you have to make those mistakes to see it through. I think, for example, when they got caught on the edge of the box, I think that's a goalkeeping error. I mean, Martinez, the timing of the pass is wrong. That pass was never on, and it invited pressure. And so those mistakes can destabilize even the best coaching plans. I think in general, I've been very impressed actually with the way Emery has been able to get Villa playing his football very, very quickly. You know, that kind of 4-4-2 block, that ability to be organised, closing those spaces between the lines. And I think they've looked dynamic on the counter at times as well. They've got that speed, and getting those wide players to work as hard as they are, it's quite a hard thing to do. And so he's got buy-in. You need that. That's something he never got really at Paris Saint-Germain, which is why ultimately that didn't work out in Paris. But I think it's a really good start. I know people will look at it and think maybe a couple of results could be better, but I think the shape of it looks good to me.
Yeah, I mean, 5 wins from 8, and I can't tell you how bad Villa were under Steven Gerrard and how little
I know
progress.
I did enough Villa games to know.
Okay. So I mean, you'll have seen then there was absolutely nothing to get behind. You couldn't see what the plan was at all. You know, Unai Emery's come in, and you can see straight away there's a plan. Even when Villa lost on Saturday, I still saw things that I liked from that game. They were still dangerous coming forward, which again they weren't under Steven Gerrard at all. And it was just a case of they made too many mistakes, and they gifted Leicester the game. Obviously, if they make those mistakes against Manchester City, they'll get punished because Manchester City are an elite team. But you all have seen a lot of Emery coming up against elite teams. Do you think there's things that Villa can take from those past games that he's had for Villarreal and Sevilla?
Yeah, definitely, Dan. Because if you look at, I think last season in the Champions League is really instructive, actually, because what they were able to do against teams like Juventus was there, and Liverpool to an extent. In that, I know, you know, it was tricky in that first leg for them, but what they do is they are incredibly disciplined without the ball, and it's all about being in the right spaces, moving as a unit, trying to make sure there aren't gaps in between the lines so that teams can suddenly open you up. It's about fullbacks working really hard. Juan Foyth did that really, really well for Villarreal, for example. He was very intelligent in terms of when to get forward, and he would know when to kind of make that third centre back, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that with Ashley Young at times, haven't we? That you have that kind of asymmetric pattern where Alex Moreno, who's very, very attacking, wants to get forward all the time, wants to try and drive towards the box. When he goes forwards, Ashley Young will come in with his experience and make that third man. All of these little tactical things are about split-second decisions and about knowing your job. And I think maybe it's a bit, I think this is a really good test of where Villa are at in that, in terms of the players taking on board that information. But with Villarreal, I remember the game in Turin against Juventus, and what they rode their luck a bit. Juventus hit the frame of the goal, had other chances they didn't take. But what Villarreal were very, very good at was just taking time off the clock, just making it really difficult for Juventus to have any meaningful impact. And they shrink the game to a point where suddenly they know they can go for it. And it was fascinating, that game at Juventus, because they were able to hang in there. And then when there were opportunities to get forward and do some damage, they did just that. And it was kind of the perfect away performance, really.
I guess those games that we're speaking about and that you're talking about, they were cup games, whereas obviously this is a one-off league game. So he'll have come up against Real Madrid and Barcelona in the league. But, you know, this is a league game away in the Premier League. But Villa have been very good away from home under Emery. They've won 3 from 3 since he's come in, and they've looked pretty good, and they've done a lot of the stuff that you've just mentioned already in those away games. But do you think this early it's going to be difficult to implement something like that against a team like Manchester City, who will be a wounded animal from the weekend as well? I think you'll see them bounce back. I think you'll see De Bruyne come back in. He'll be angry. He'll have a point to prove. Haaland's gone a game without scoring, which hasn't happened too many times this season. So to implement that against City on Sunday, it's probably going to be pretty tough.
Yeah, it will be. And this is the ultimate test in many ways, because for all of their patchy form, City is still one of the best teams in the world. There's no question about that. There's a reason why they're favourites to win the Champions League. There's a reason why a lot of people think they'll chase Arsenal down in the Premier League. It's interesting what you say about the league and the cup, because I think the thing that's really interesting about Emery is he has his principles, but because those principles do work really well in cup competitions, he's very successful in those, but they don't necessarily change. And I think he will do what he normally does, which is to try and be compact, to try and make it tough for City in that mid-block. He will try and win the ball high up the pitch. It's what he always tries to do. But it's about when you can't win that ball, you snap back into your shape as quickly as you possibly can. He will try to pose a threat. It won't just be going there and parking the bus, but you have to wait for the right opportunities. I think what's tricky is that City is so very good at keeping the ball. And a lot of what Emery's about is those regains, winning the ball, and then when you've won the ball, being able to snap into the counter-attack. It's quite hard to do against the Guardiola team because they are so good in possession. But we have seen this season City being a little bit more vulnerable on the counter.
Yeah, well, Emery's found it difficult to beat Pep in his career because he hasn't beaten him so far. We did a stat show yesterday and discovered that he'd drawn 4 and lost 8 against Pep in across 12 games. So he's never actually beaten Pep, which disappointed me a little bit because I assume because he's got such a good record against all these big managers, I assume he must have done at some point, but he hasn't. Just wanted to ask you about the midfield, because the way Emery lines up his midfield is quite unique, and we saw it quite a lot with Villarreal last season. That sometimes you'd see a fullback play wide, sometimes you'd see a central midfielder kind of playing as that hybrid wide / central midfielder. So Capoue, Coquelin as well, sometimes played there. Villa have got their central midfield is actually quite well set with Douglas Luiz and Kamara. Kamara in particular, he had a bad game against Leicester, was involved in a couple of the goals Villa conceded. But generally, from what you've seen of him, have you been impressed with him? Because I still can't believe that no one else, really a Champions League team, has managed to pull him in. I think Villa have done well to get him in, because I think at the moment, for where we are, he's probably above our level.
Well, Champions League teams are certainly interested. I mean, this is a guy that's played a lot of high quality football already in his career. He was, when fit, a key player for Marseille. And I think people knew how good he was. I think what Villa have done really, really well is presented an opportunity to him. I think they showed him why he was their top choice for that position. I think they flattered him, which is what all players and people want. You know, you want somebody to come to you and think, we think you're absolutely amazing.
I did it to you for this show. I did exactly what I did.
Exactly. Big presentation, chase me for months. Exactly. That's how you do it. And they were able to convince him that not only would he be a main player, he would regularly play, but he would play in a team that had ambition. And I think straight away what we've seen from him is that incredible ability to break up play, but also to get forward. He's got bags of energy. He can really take over a midfield. But what Villa have got, which is really, really important in an Emery team, is a midfield two that work together and understand each other's game. And I think that will get better all the time. Camara will understand Douglas Luiz a lot more. Douglas Luiz has got that excellent all-round skill set as well. So that's the heart of any Emery team. If you go back to Villarreal, it was all about Parejo and Capoue. They set the tone. And what they had was a very intelligent midfielder in Manu Trigueros, who knew when to be wide and knew when to come in to make that extra man in midfield. Now, I think guys like Buendia, like Jacob Ramsey, who I'm a massive fan of, I think they have the game intelligence to be able to do that. And so I think you will see that. I think you will see that ability of the wide player to move in and make those overloads if necessary. And so I think already we're seeing recognizable building blocks of an Emery team. And he does have the personnel to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that about Jacob Ramsey because I actually think he's probably one of Villa's most important players. I think because he carries a goal threat, he carries the ball well as well. And like you say, for someone so young, I think he's pretty intelligent as well. So I think when he's had a bit of time to work under Emery, I think he'll come through and he'll thrive for Villa. Because I know
It was one of the things, Dan, just quickly, it was one of the things that to me, when I watched Villa under Gerrard, and it was especially noticeable, I felt towards the end of Gerrard's reign, Ramsey was caged. He was part of this kind of really solid midfield unit that would just shunt from side to side. And he couldn't do anything. He couldn't break forward. He couldn't affect the game. Now he has not only the freedom to affect the game, but a demand on him to affect the game because Unai Emery knows he's so good.
Yeah, just wanted to ask you because I know you work in the Bundesliga well, probably every weekend. Actually, you do a lot of Bundesliga work. Leon Bailey, because there's a talent there. He's a player I like, but the problem Villa have got with him is just consistency. Because if he starts a game well, he tends to go on then and have a really effective game. He scored a fair few early goals for Villa in games. I think he must have had 3 or 4 early goals in front of the whole end this season already. But then he'll have that one good game. But then he'll have 4, 5, 6 games where you look at him and you think, he can't dribble. He can't beat a man. What's going on here? Because I look at his last season in the Bundesliga and I look at his, just on the face of it, his goal record, his output. It was up there with the Bayern Munich wingers. It was pretty much identical actually. His goal and assist output for Leverkusen in his last season. But at Villa, he had injuries last season, so I think you can just write off last season completely. But he's always been that inconsistent player because he's like dangerously inconsistent for Villa.
100%. 100%. It's exactly what his game has been. And you looked, as you say, you look towards the end of his Leverkusen time, and it was the player that we always thought he was going to be. And he had some incredible games when he first came into the league, and you thought, wow, okay, this guy's quick, he can score from range, he's got the ability to dribble past people. And then you realize there were games where he would just disappear. And I think he became frustrated. He was too pumped up for a couple of games. He got sent off in a couple of derbies. I think he definitely got sent off against Gladbach. Got a feeling he might have been sent off against Köln as well, but he was definitely sent off in 1 or 2 derbies. And it felt like a guy that wasn't at peace with himself. It felt like a guy that hadn't found the consistency he wanted. Got to remember, when he came to Leverkusen, a lot of the talk around him was because Leverkusen by nature is a stepping stone club. That they probably don't accept that, but they wouldn't get these players in the first place if there wasn't the ability to develop them, move them on to a Premier League club or a top European club elsewhere. And I remember talking to journalists who were saying his people are talking about Real Madrid, they're talking about Roma, they're talking about, top destinations. And it never happened for him. And I think that consistency is why, because clubs looked and thought, right, well, he can do it in 1, 2, 3 games. What about the next 4 where he's disappeared? So that's a challenge I think he can still meet. He's still got a lot of room in his career to do that. I think Emery will help him do that because Emery won't let up in terms of the demands he places upon him. But I do think it's getting towards the time where he will define the player that he is in the next few months, couple of years, because he's got an opportunity to go to that next level. He's got to find a way to take it because so far in his career, he hasn't been able to do that.
Yeah, and Villa have got quite a small squad, really, that we could go through what we think the team might be, and there'd probably only be one position that would be up for debate, and that would be left back. Now, when we were at Sky in January, I spoke to you about Alex Moreno, and you said he's a player that you really, really like. Seems like he's a better fit for the Emery system than Luca Dean just because of his pace.
Yeah, and I think Emery was a big driver in that signing because he knows him from La Liga, knows how important a player he was for Betis. Betis didn't want to let him go. He was linked with Forest before he made the move to Villa. He was linked with Forest for a couple of transfer windows, actually, before he made that move to Villa. I really like him. He's athletic. He wants to get forwards. He's somebody that will drive rather than Dean, who likes to cross it. You'll see Moreno driving into the box. You've probably
he's been good.
Seen that a fair bit already. And I just think it gives them... Fullbacks are very important for Emery because if you look at it, a lot of the play goes narrow. And the reason for that, and those kind of forwards in the half spaces or the channels, is that he wants to create that space so that the fullbacks can get outside. And that's an important role, I think, for Alex Moreno. So I think fans will love him, and I think he'll make more of an impact as it goes on.
Yeah, there's been good signs early doors. He came on at half-time in the last game against Leicester, and me personally, I thought he offered a lot more in that game than Luke could do with. And Villa kind of lack pace a little bit in their side, and he adds pace into the team, which is something all Villa fans have said that they've needed for the last couple of years. And just before we let you go, Kev, this is a Villa show, remember, so be kind. What would your score prediction be for Sunday?
I'm going to be commentating on the game, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a really, really interesting game because I do think Villa have the capability of really frustrating City. It's going to be about whether those opportunities open up to counter, I think. And that's what he's found difficult against Guardiola teams before. It might be a little early in Emery's evolution with Villa in terms of what he's trying to get across to the players. It's a really good test of where they're at. I think City probably win the game, but only 2-1, something like that. I don't think it's going to be Villa getting smashed by any. I'll probably live to regret this, but in any way, shape, or form, I just don't, because I do think he has the ability to set a team up and frustrate, and City will have to work ever so hard to create those opportunities. So I do think it'll be tight. I think City might just nick it, but I think it will be tight.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one. So Ed's just coming on the chat and said time to take advantage of the chaos. Obviously, there's a lot going on at Manchester City at the moment, so maybe Villa can come in and capitalise. But as I said yesterday and today, I'm a bit concerned because there has been a lot going on at Manchester City, and I do feel that they'll come back with something to show and something to prove this weekend. But Kev, enjoy your commentary on Sunday. I didn't realise you were commentating on the game, so that works even better. That you've come on and talked us through today. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully you see Aston Villa win at Manchester City. And it's been great to talk to you.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah. As ever, thanks to Luke Roper for sponsoring the show. If you want to get 20% off everything they have to offer, use the code TVV20. Again, thanks to Kev for joining me. Thanks to Adam for producing. And as ever, up the Villa.